There are names in history that don't shout, they whisper, yet their echoes shape everything that comes after. John D. Rockefeller was one of them. He once said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God." But what he really possessed wasn't divine favor. It was engineering. He didn't just build a company. He built a machine, a system of control so efficient, so precise, that it redefined what capitalism could be. Rockefeller didn't invent oil. He invented the architecture of power that still fuels the modern world. The mid-1800s. America was a country being reborn, scarred from civil war, roaring with ambition. Railroads stretched like veins across the continent. Factories burned through coal and steel, and beneath it all oil, the black liquid that turned darkness into profit. In towns like Titusville, Pennsylvania, men dug into the earth with more hope than plan. Oil gushed, fortunes rose, then fell, prices crashed, fires raged, and speculation devoured reason. There were no rules, only greed and chance. That chaos repelled Rockefeller. To him, disorder was sin, control was salvation. Born in 1839, in upstate New York, Rockefeller grew up under two shadows: a devout Baptist mother who preached discipline, and a father who was a traveling con man, selling miracle potions to strangers. From his mother, he learned restraint. From his father, he learned strategy. At 16, he took his first job as a bookkeeper. He fell in love with numbers, their purity, their obedience. Numbers never lied. People did, he once said. "I would rather earn 1% on 100 men's efforts than 100% on my own." That sentence would become the foundation of his empire. In 1863, he invested in a small refinery in Cleveland. While others chased barrels and drilled fields, Rockefeller studied flow. How oil moved, how costs leaked, how systems failed. 7 years later, he founded Standard Oil. And from that moment, capitalism changed forever. He negotiated secret rebates with railroads, deals that let him transport oil cheaper than anyone else. Competitors couldn't understand how he was always one step ahead. The truth was simple: Rockefeller didn't play the market, he designed it. When rivals refused to sell, he dropped prices until they broke. When they gave up, he bought them, politely, efficiently, permanently. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of the American oil industry. To Rockefeller, monopoly wasn't corruption, it was perfection. Competition was waste. Waste was sin. He believed the world needed order, not chaos, and that he had been chosen to impose it. Every drop of oil, every inch of pipeline, every cent of cost, optimized. Nothing left to chance. He didn't see himself as greedy. He saw himself as necessary. He once told a journalist, "The day of combination is here to stay. Individualism has gone, never to return." He wasn't predicting the future. He was building it. Standard Oil became more than a company. It became a system. He bought barrel factories, refineries, railcars, pipelines, shipping terminals. He didn't just sell oil. He owned the flow of energy itself. Every competitor became part of the system, or fuel for it. It wasn't personal. It was mechanical. And Rockefeller was the engineer. By the dawn of the 20th century, Rockefeller was both admired and feared. To the public, he was a symbol of excess, the face of monopoly itself. To his peers, he was a genius, the man who had turned chaos into order. But to the U.S. government, he had become something else entirely, a threat. Standard Oil wasn't just a company anymore. It was a state within a state, a network of pipelines, lawyers, and loyal financiers that moved faster and struck deeper than any law could reach. At its height, Standard Oil was worth more than most nations. Its influence extended from Wall Street to Washington, and every politician knew crossing Rockefeller meant political death. In 1904, a journalist named Ida Tarbell changed everything. Her father had once been crushed by Rockefeller's business tactics, and she spent years gathering evidence. Letters, contracts, whispers from boardrooms. Her exposé, The History of the Standard Oil Company, wasn't just a story, it was a detonation. Tarbell's words cut through Rockefeller's silence like acid through steel. She exposed the secret rebates with railroads, the price wars, the coercive buyouts, the web of shell companies that disguised monopoly as competition. She revealed what Rockefeller had worked his entire life to conceal, that his empire ran not on oil, but on information and control. The public was outraged. For the first time, Rockefeller's calm smile, his quiet, almost clerical precision, looked like something else: cold-blooded dominance. In 1906, the U.S. government filed a lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act, accusing Standard Oil of monopolistic behavior. The case dragged on for 5 years, winding its way through courts, newspapers, and the halls of Congress. Rockefeller remained calm, unnervingly so. He stopped giving interviews. He began appearing in public less often, his face half hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. While lawyers argued, he quietly restructured the company, distributing ownership across a network of subsidiaries. By the time the Supreme Court ruled in 1911, declaring Standard Oil a monopoly and ordering it to be broken into 34 separate companies, Rockefeller had already won. Each of those companies was still his. The headlines declared victory for democracy. The monopoly had fallen. But when the dust settled, something strange happened. The combined value of the 34 companies tripled. Rockefeller's fortune exploded. He became the world's first billionaire. And the United States had learned an unintended lesson. You can dismantle an empire, but you can't dismantle the system it created. Standard Oil's children would go on to become giants of their own. Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, Amoco, each a fragment of the original machine, still pumping, still refining, still shaping the world. And Rockefeller? He retreated from public view, not in shame, but in evolution. He realized that power doesn't need visibility to endure. True power thrives in abstraction. If he could no longer rule through industry, he would rule through philanthropy, the next frontier of influence. The empire had been broken, on paper, but Rockefeller understood something his critics never did. When you lose power, you don't fight to take it back, you redefine it. He realized that money could buy influence, but philanthropy could buy legitimacy. It could turn the villain into a visionary. It could turn fear into faith. So, while the world celebrated the fall of Standard Oil, Rockefeller began building something far more enduring. Not a company this time, but an idea. In public, he played the role of the humble old man. He gave dimes to children on the street. He smiled for cameras. He talked about morality, discipline, and the grace of giving. But behind that gentle exterior was the same calculating mind, the engineer of systems, now designing a new one. He created the Rockefeller Foundation, the University of Chicago, and later the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, institutions that would reshape science, education, and global policy. To many, it looked like redemption. To those who watched closer, it was transformation. Power reborn in a more respectable form. The architecture of legitimacy. Rockefeller had learned that reputation is a kind of currency, and like all currencies, it could be managed, invested, multiplied. He poured hundreds of millions, billions in today's money, into universities, laboratories, and hospitals. He helped fund medical breakthroughs that saved millions of lives, from eradicating hookworm in the American South, to financing global campaigns against yellow fever. But his greatest creation wasn't medicine, it was the concept of strategic philanthropy. The idea that giving should serve structure, not sentiment. He didn't just donate, he designed his donations like investments. Each dollar built infrastructure, networks, and institutions that would last for centuries, and quietly shape the modern world in his image. Rockefeller's philanthropy wasn't charity, it was continuity, a way to keep influence alive in a form that could not be legislated or dissolved. Governments could break up companies, but they couldn't touch foundations. He had found a new kind of fortress, built not from oil and steel, but from ideals and endowments. A fortress that would outlive him, his children, and even the laws that once tried to contain him. By the 1920s, the Rockefeller Foundation had become a quiet force behind everything from public health to policy. It shaped education reform, funded scientific research, and even influenced the founding principles of the United Nations. To the public, Rockefeller had redeemed himself. To history, he had rewritten the definition of power. There's a strange paradox in his life. A man who destroyed rivals, then built hospitals. A man who crushed competition, then cured disease. A man who believed control was divine. He once said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift from God, to be developed and used to the best of one's ability for the good of mankind." He truly believed it. But, good of mankind, was always defined on his terms. His foundation shaped what education meant, what science pursued, what health systems prioritized. It wasn't evil, it was order. The same order he had once imposed on oil, now imposed on society itself. By the time of his death in 1937, Rockefeller had become something close to myth, the world's first billionaire, a symbol of both capitalism's brilliance and its moral cost. But his legacy didn't end with his death. It evolved, through family trusts, endowments, and boards of directors. His influence continued, invisible but intact. The Rockefeller Foundation, Chase Bank, Standard Oil's descendants, Exxon, Chevron, Mobil. These weren't just institutions, they were arteries of a global system he had designed. And as new empires rose, in energy, finance, and technology, they all borrowed from his blueprint, monopolize the flow, control the narrative, and when power becomes too obvious, make it noble. By the mid-20th century, Rockefeller was gone, but his architecture remained. He had built more than an oil empire. He had designed the operating system of modern capitalism. Corporations, banks, and governments still follow it, even if they no longer remember who wrote the code. The rules were simple, but ruthless. Control the flow, shape the story, and never, ever appear to be in control. That was the Rockefeller blueprint, a manual for power disguised as progress. Rockefeller understood before anyone else that power doesn't come from what you produce, it comes from what you control. Oil was only the beginning. He controlled the railroads that moved it, the barrels that stored it, the refineries that processed it, and the banks that financed it. He built a vertical empire, a self-contained ecosystem where every road led back to him. That structure didn't vanish with Standard Oil's breakup. It replicated. It became the model for corporations across every industry: steel, automobiles, media, and now data. When Apple controls your hardware, software, and store, when Amazon owns warehouses, shipping, and servers, they're not innovating, they're repeating Rockefeller. Rockefeller's true genius wasn't in oil, it was in system design. He replaced the age of individuals with the age of institutions. Before him, wealth was personal. After him, it became structural. He understood that individuals die, but institutions, trusts, corporations, foundations, can live forever. They don't age, they don't sleep, they compound. That's why his influence never faded. It simply changed form. From barrels to balance sheets, from factories to foundations, from Standard Oil to standard practice. After Rockefeller, industry gave way to finance. The titans of steel and oil were replaced by bankers and traders, but they were all working from the same script. Where Rockefeller built pipelines for oil, they built pipelines for capital, investment flows, derivatives, global markets. They learned to control money the way he had controlled energy, as a current that powered everything else. He had proven that the secret to power wasn't production, but intermediation, being the channel everyone depends on, the system no one can bypass. And in that sense, every modern financial network, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, is an echo of his design. Economists call it competition. Rockefeller would have called it illusion. He knew that markets are not natural. They are constructed, managed, engineered, and the ones who build the market always win, no matter who's trading inside it. That's why Standard Oil's breakup never broke the system. The system was the market. Today, tech monopolies follow the same rhythm. They call it innovation, disruption, free enterprise. But look closer, and you'll see Rockefeller's fingerprints in the code. Vertical integration, data control, ecosystem dominance, and when caught, philanthropy as redemption. The same playbook. A new arena. After his death, Rockefeller's fortune evolved into foundations, trusts, and corporate stakes that still guide policy, industry, and education. His descendants funded international health programs, education initiatives, and global governance projects. To the world, they became benefactors. To history, they remained architects. Because true control doesn't demand ownership, it demands reliance. When nations depend on your systems, when economies move through your networks, you don't need to rule them. They already orbit you. By the late 20th century, Rockefeller's philosophy had merged with finance itself. Energy markets, global banks, and multinational corporations all operated on his principles of flow and consolidation. Money no longer moved in barrels or coins. It flowed as data, credit, and algorithm. The pipelines had become digital, but the logic was eternal. Control the flow, and you control the world. Every time you swipe a card, send a wire, or buy a share, you're not just participating in the economy, you're moving through the descendants of Rockefeller's system. Rockefeller's name faded from headlines, but his presence never left the stage. It lives in the invisible architecture of power, in the way companies merge, in the way markets self-correct, in the way philanthropy shapes public opinion. His greatest invention wasn't Standard Oil. It was the modern idea of inevitability, the belief that capitalism is not a system we made, but a force of nature we must obey. He didn't just engineer wealth, he engineered belief. By the 21st century, Rockefeller's empire no longer existed in name, but it lived on in structure. Its fragments, Exxon, Chevron, J.P. Morgan Chase, the Rockefeller Foundation, were no longer companies. They were organs in a body he had designed, still pumping influence through the veins of modern civilization. The world had changed, from steam to silicon, from barrels to bytes, but the Rockefeller formula still governed it. Control the flow, and you control the future. When John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil, he wasn't just cornering a market. He was writing the source code of corporate capitalism. He proved that an industry could be centralized, that control could be disguised as efficiency, and that public trust could be manufactured through reputation. Today, the same logic powers the biggest companies on Earth: Google, Apple, Amazon, and Meta, each one a digital Standard Oil, each one a system where the product is secondary, and the infrastructure is everything. They don't sell oil, they sell dependence, and like Rockefeller, they build it so well that the world forgets how to live without it. Rockefeller didn't believe in luck. He believed in design, in patterns, rules, and divine arithmetic. And in a strange way, the modern world still runs on that faith. Every stock price, every algorithm, every transaction isn't just data, it's belief. Belief that the system works. Belief that markets correct themselves. Belief that progress is inevitable. That faith was Rockefeller's greatest invention. Not oil, not Standard Oil. Faith, institutionalized. Faith, automated. His descendants carried the torch, quietly. The Rockefeller Foundation became an invisible engine for global influence. It shaped education systems, medical research, even global governance. When the League of Nations fell, when the United Nations rose, the Rockefellers were there, funding, advising, guiding. Their headquarters in New York, built on Rockefeller land, donated by the family itself. They had transformed from monopolists to moral architects. Their empire now wore the mask of public service, but behind that mask was the same principle. Power must always flow downward, never appear to come from above. By the late 20th century, Rockefeller's heirs no longer needed to dominate industries. They influenced ideas. They funded environmental initiatives, climate research, and economic policy networks. They shaped the conversations that shaped the world. It wasn't about oil anymore. It was about narrative. And narrative, they understood, is the most valuable resource of all. Control the story, and you control the perception. Control perception, and you control reality. That's how a 19th century oil tycoon became the philosophical ancestor of the digital age. Every great fortune today echoes Rockefeller. When corporations claim to change the world, when CEOs speak of purpose over profit, when monopolies call themselves ecosystems, you can hear his voice behind the curtain. He taught the world that the path to dominance isn't brute force, it's subtlety. That true power is invisible, it's normalized. And so, the Rockefeller empire never really ended. It simply became invisible, absorbed into the world's economic bloodstream. Rockefeller's story isn't just about wealth, it's about the transformation of control. From oil to money, from money to data, from data to belief. He turned capitalism into a living organism, self-replicating, self-justifying, self-protecting, and that organism now rules the planet. We live, work, and dream inside it, a system designed by one man who believed that order was sacred. Rockefeller didn't conquer nations, he conquered entropy. He imposed precision on chaos, turned greed into discipline, and transformed control into a moral duty. He proved that you don't need to own the throne to rule the kingdom. You just need to own the system that builds it. His empire began with oil, it ended with everything, and if you listened closely, beneath the hum of modern industry, beneath the algorithms, the markets, and the news cycles, you can still hear it, the quiet, steady rhythm of Rockefeller's machine, still running, still refining, still believing in its own perfection.